Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hi, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before I get started, I'd like to thank Prototype Prime. If you have not been to Prototype Prime, it is a technology co-working space in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, and we are recording from their amazing podcast room. So thank you, Prototype Prime. Today's podcast is all about building rapport in a remote culture, a culture where there are many or multiple remote workers or employees. Now, this is an interesting one for me because I can tell you, I'm not generally the biggest fan of remote full-time employees, mainly from a culture perspective. There's a lot of pros and cons, don't get me wrong, but from a culture perspective, I've had many experiences that would indicate that having somebody next to you is always significantly better than a remote employee. Now, what are some of those examples? Well, I worked at one company as a technology software company, and I was in Atlanta and they were in California, and their headquarters in California. And I had to work with the sales team very often. They were all located in that California office. And I had to work with many other people in the organization. And what I generally found was, I was new, I was coming on board, I was remote, I had never met these people before. Even my interview for that position was done in Atlanta by resources in Atlanta, but I had to work with a lot of people in California. And what I found was that I just didn't seem to get the response I needed in order to get things done. When I asked for things, they took a long time, and it wasn't in a bad way. I didn't really notice at first. It wasn't like I was treated poorly or anything like that. It just took a long time to get responses. And I thought, well, it's time zone, it's this, it's that, whatever it might be. Well, they had a sales kickoff meeting and brought everybody in the sales organization on site. And we got to go out and do a lot of interaction within that sales organization during the kickoff, have drinks afterwards. There was a lot of face-to-face time and rapport building. After that, my level of engagement with the team seemed to go up significantly. Once you're in front of somebody and you build that rapport, even though you go back to be in a remote work environment, all of a sudden you've spent that time with them. They feel like they have more of a connection. They feel like they need to respond to you more significantly. So one of my takeaways through that and another similar experience that I had was, if you have remote workers, it is of paramount importance to bring them on site and meet the majority of the team as quickly and as early as possible, because you are affecting their productivity by not having them or giving them the ability to build that face-to-face time. And it's kind of odd as humans, we treat people better when we have met them and spent time with them. It's kind of the way it works. I'll give you another example that I like is all of the video and GoToWebinar, Zoom meetings, everything that I get on a recurring basis. So in a lot of organizations that I worked for where I was working remote and working with customers that were remote, they were all done via Zoom, via GoToMeeting, and all these other types of clients. So we're doing these screen shares, and most often people don't want to share their camera. They just don't do it. Right? They're either not dressed for the role that day. That happens a lot because they're working remotely from their home. They don't have a good camera. They just don't like seeing their face up there. I think that's probably like 90% of them as far as I would think. So there's all these reasons people don't turn on their camera, even though they have the technology and the capability. I think a lot of them, maybe they're not paying attention. I think that happens a good bit. So there's just all these different factors where people don't want to turn on their camera. However, what I have found, and I've tested this, I would say I have empirical evidence, and that if on every meeting from the beginning of when you meet a client or a person, you're sharing that video and they're sharing a video, they can put a face with a voice. And when they can put a face with a voice and when they have to look at you while they speak, the interaction is fundamentally better. They treat you better. They work with you in a much better way. They just connect to you much more on a human level. It's almost as if, you're a voice on the other side of the phone. Without the video, you're a voice on the other side of the phone, and you could very well be a telemarketer, right? People just treat you differently. So, although remote cultures and remote employees can be a challenge, the main thing that I'd like you to take away is how can you go above and beyond to build more rapport and a better relationship between remote employees and your core team or your headquarters team, whatever it might be, your customers, and anybody else, partners, anybody else that they need to engage with. Because sometimes it can be expensive and you can have to fly them out and take some time out of the week, all the way to very simple solutions of making it a rule in your company and part of your culture that you can't get on a meeting without the video turned on. So what I want you to think about is how to build rapport and relationships with the people that you don't see every day.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.